Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone out there, how you doing? Hopefully you're doing well and you are ready for some Computer America. So today on the program, we have the one, the only, the infamous, and probably for good reasons, Mike Cermak. He is, of course, our regular correspondent, been with us for years and years and years. And hey, you know, we have a lot of interesting news and topics and things to talk about. It's going to be a lot of fun, and stick around. We'll be getting to him in just a moment. But before we do, mandatory announcements. ComputerAmerica.com. Go there to find show notes, links to anything that we talk about here on today's show, just so that, hey, you know, if something that you want to read further into, or, you know, see if we're just making all of this up, which would be a very interesting way to kind of do a show, see if we can make up enough fake news to fill up a whole show. But no, we don't make up any of this. We just kind of report on it and talk about it. ComputerAmerica.com. Find past shows, future shows, podcasts, episodes, reviews, articles, and more. All that good stuff. Find us on social media, blah, blah, blah. Let's go ahead and get talking to Mike Cermak. He is the owner-operator of techguy.org. If you head on over to ComputerAmerica.com, at the top, if you're looking for tech support, feel free to send us an email, but we always just, you know, kind of redirect people to the wonderful community that they have over there, and they are very, very helpful. And techguy.org, definitely check it out. Mike, welcome back on to Computer America. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Doing well. It's I had the pleasure of going to the DMV today to
lies. Why would you do that?
I've been putting it off for like 2.5 years, and I was hoping.
I thought you were going to say 2.5 months as a result of the pandemic, but you said years.
Yeah, it's I can't take that lazy way out. But no, and actually because of the pandemic, I was like, oh, people aren't going to want to subject themselves to the DMV during a pandemic. So you walked
right in, I assume.
First of all, everyone gets stopped at the door. Second of all, the line was around the building. It's this was like my third time trying to go because the line's so long. More so because everyone has to keep 6 feet. And if you can imagine the bureaucracy of the DMV mixed with the pandemic precautions that everyone is taking, boy,
I can just imagine the efficiencies.
The perfect storm of just red tape, and it's like, hey, step back from that line. I had to do, and this is totally not technology related, but I had to do a little dance where obviously they have like the counter where the employee stands and you stand, and normally, you know, you're about 3 feet away from each other. We had to do this dance where they had a line 3 feet back from that. And every time I, went up to drop papers, or, put papers on the counter or pay for the transaction or take the vision test, things like that, the employee behind it would like immediately and almost like, just like recoil in horror. Yeah. And step back 3 feet. And like,
I wouldn't take it too personally.
I smell fantastic, so it couldn't have been me. But it was one of those things where it's like, every time one of us stepped forward or back, the other one had to step forward or back. And I found it, of all the precautions that COVID-19 is forcing us to take, that seemed to be one of the more ridiculous ones. But I know that they're just employees of the DMV. They don't get to make the rules, and they don't get to choose what they follow. But it seemed a little ridiculous.
I think our DMV here is still closed.
Really?
I'm pretty sure. I know they extended all the driver's license expirations and stuff for a couple of months.
Yeah, well, again, that doesn't help me because, 2.5 years, but it's, it was just one of those things. And, ladies and gentlemen, don't deal with the DMV. It's awful over there. I will say though,
I don't know if that's great legal advice. Don't deal with the DMV. Just go drive. What are those people called who think they can they're just traveling on the road? They don't need a license.
Yeah, criminals. That's it. But I will say though, that, what is the old saying? It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. So that's how we operate in America.
I'm not following your legal advice.
Please don't. But so COVID-19 actually does, kind of enter the conversation a little bit here, because our first topic that we have to talk about was the idea of contact tracing. I'm glad that you brought it up. I did mention contact tracing a couple of weeks ago when it was first floated.
Did you? Good.
Yeah. In the, let's see, in the new UK laws, the National Health Services were looking to implement something much like this, and I what's the polite way to say this? Freaked out. I flipped out, lost my lid, and overall, I was just this. It's a topic worth bringing up again. So I'm going to get your reaction first. What caught your eye about this, and then we'll talk about contact tracing, because I think it is one of the worst things that has happened in a long time.
Well, and so it's all about how it's done, right? So that's the critical part of it. A lot of governments have decided to go out on their own and come up with their own system because there really wasn't a good one out there to do otherwise. It's not like they had an option. If you want a contact tracing system, you got to make it. And, some of these governments, China and, trying to get my article up in front of me here, but, they came up with their own, which some of the designs in some of these countries are ones that Ben might not like because they have a centralized database. And for some reason, people who don't like the government and don't like the DMV might not trust the government to hold this database of every person that you have ever come in contact with. I don't know why that would be. And some of the databases go further than that. Not only do they keep track of who you've come in contact with, but where. So they have, this nice database of everywhere everyone's ever been and who they've come in contact with.
Well, yeah,
and for some reason, some people aren't comfortable with that.
Well, before we start reacting to it, I wanted you to explain a little bit about the technology, because I've seen a couple of different ways that it's...
So, and basically the idea here, for those who missed the earlier episode where Ben already talked about it or been living under a rock, the idea of contact tracing is that if I have come in contact with someone who is later identified as having COVID-19 or having coronavirus, then I would want to know about that so I can quarantine myself and maybe not hug my kids quite as often. And there's, I'd be hiding in the basement much more often with a valid excuse this time.
You're like at the last second, you're gonna like dodge your kids and be like, no, I can't.
We got 3 kids here, and I get to hide downstairs in the basement and work periodically and be like, oh, I'm sorry, hon, this contact tracing came up and it says that whenever Ben and I were having a beer together the other night, that now since then he has come up and been identified as having COVID-19, so now I need to hide away in the basement. But that is a valid thing that legitimately could save lives, because then I'm not going to be going out there and riding on the bus and shaking hands with people and whatnot, which you shouldn't be doing a lot of these things anyway, but presumably you'd be taking more precautions if you knew that you had, within the last, however many days, been in close contact with someone who does have the virus.
So contact tracing, and sorry to cut you off there, but contact tracing has been around for a little while, and actually for decades even.
Right.
The difference is that instead of COVID-19, contact tracing was used for mainly STDs and AIDS and HIV transmission, things like that. Where someone would be diagnosed and they say, well, you have this disease. Have you been in contact with anyone? And then that's where contact tracing would come. But it would be more of the line of a person sitting down with essentially your case, and they would go essentially door to door as best they could, finding people who you've interacted with.
And it relies on the patient's memory, and also even capability, right? So if it turns out that I'm carrying it right now and don't know it, and be like, well, who have you come in contact with? Like, I don't know. I went to Lowe's and the supermarket, and I don't who the heck. So I think we've all probably seen that chart from the restaurant in China, where it shows one of the people who were infected and the various people at nearby tables who also became infected, and that's using that kind of contact tracing where they can go back and try and figure out where you might have come in contact with it and where you may have gotten it. So the technology angle on this is they want to do that in a little bit more reliable way rather than just memory and I guess whoever was at Lowe's at around 11.
Yeah, and really, other countries are definitely starting to use this. I think South Korea had one where they had one individual who went, had a night out on the town with COVID-19, and where South Korea pretty much thought that they had it under control. Transmission rates were down and, new patients were down. This one person reinfected about, now they're trying to track down, I think 11,000 people in the country because this one person was, went out. And really the entire point, and before I get to the point where I don't like it, but the entire point, I get the altruistic intentions of contact tracing. If they can find everyone that said, you were within 5 feet of someone on the train with it, you might want to take precautions, quarantine yourself for 14 days. This pandemic would have been completely contained much, much faster if something like this was already implemented. I get why they want to do it. But Mike, that there's a problem with something like this. This is a lot of invasion of privacy.
I don't see what could possibly ever go wrong with the government always tracing who I've come in contact with.
They already did that with the Patriot Act. Why did they have to come back and do it with contact tracing?
No, isn't the correct answer, if you have nothing to hide, isn't that what you're supposed to?
I have lots of things to hide. This is not right.
Well, and what's interesting here, it says Chinese citizens must also carry a health code app, which is essentially what they use for this contact tracing, that also rates their risk level, that allows them to enter shops or ride on trains. And I figured that's something Ben would approve of.
Well, there's not many things that we're talking about COVID, and I just can't help but from touch my face. I just need to.
I feel the same way about licking doorknobs.
Exactly. You can't you can't use the sentence China and Ben would approve in the same sentence, really, about anything with technology. If you want to see a dystopian future, China's probably it. And this idea of a health code, essentially, they want to take it a step further, like you said. I think China's approach, though, is about the only realistic way that you could get it to work, but at the same time, it's very authoritarian, in which China can do. Mike, think about if, let's say, this was an opt-in system. Even if, think about all the apps out there and how wonderful they are, or helpful, or whatever. I would say, let's say 1 in 5, which is very generous, saying 20% of the population actually downloaded it and installed it on their phones. What about the 4 in 5 who don't? What about the people who don't own smartphones, different operating systems, no cell phone connection, so they can't, or they have Bluetooth turned off, things like that. How effective, Mike, do you think this really is, even if it was an opt-in system? China and what they're doing is awful, but I think that's the only way to get something like this to work.
You're right. The effectiveness will depend a lot on how much people actually are willing to use it, and if the technology is compatible. There have been some countries that have made their own apps, and there's been minor problems like that Apple devices and Android devices don't detect one another. Minor problem, right? And other minor problems like the app only runs while the phone screen is turned on Apple devices. Whatever, little issues like that.
Can't run in the
But
background. Yeah.
the difference now is that Apple and Google have gotten together to create their own standard for this, and it's going to be baked into the operating system, so you won't have to download a separate thing. It is still going to be something you can turn on or off, that it's optional. It's not going to be forced on you yet. But the oh, sorry, did I steal your line there?
No, you're spot on. I agree.
But it's interesting to me that Apple and Google have come together to do this, because I don't know how long you've been watching technology, but that doesn't happen all that often. They're kind of always coming together in the in the courtroom, not so much anywhere else.
New standards are, and really that seems to be the only way to fast track is unfortunately through disaster. We've seen some of the standards for cell phone communication, 4G, 5G, and stuff like that. But what do you call it? Like tiering, like especially during national disasters or emergencies or natural disasters. People would all call their relatives and say, hey, I'm okay. But then at the same time, emergency responders wouldn't be able to use the exact same network that they're trying to contact to get help to people in an efficient manner. So things like that led the cell phone carriers to implement technology that would essentially prioritize first responders, messages and things over just everyday communications, which is, like I said, it takes disasters for these companies to come together to really implement something that's kind of common sense. Now, here's the thing. I don't like contact tracing at all. That is shocking to you, I know, but man, and they even say right here in the article, major concern is that the app will log an overwhelming amount of erroneous contacts. Mike, think about how many lawsuits, how many billions of dollars Facebook, I think, is still contending with. Because if you want to talk about a contact tracing app, I'm surprised they didn't just use Facebook. Facebook did this exact thing, and they've been taken to court over it for the past 10 years.
Yeah, but that's only to service ads. That's minor.
Yeah,
as opposed to saving lives. Now, so let me try and sell you on this new contact tracing that Apple and Google have come up with. Are you ready? You ready to change your mind on this, Ben?
I have it. I have a very close mind.
I'm being a little bit sarcastic, but I think you will approve of some of it. And first of all, their first thing in this document, I just pulled up their exposure notification system FAQ, and it says, how will the system protect privacy and security? Google and Apple have put privacy. Again, it's so weird to read those together. We'll put privacy at the forefront. First, each user will have to make an explicit choice to turn on the technology, and it can also be turned off again by the user at any time.
See, and again, like I said,
let me tell you more.
Okay.
Now, here's what's
I'm
different
making
about
a list. Okay.
You're good. Check it twice. The thing that is the biggest difference between this and other contact tracing apps that are out there is that there isn't a central database of X person connected with Y person. The way it works is that there's a key that's generated on your phone. So suppose I had contact tracing turned on my phone. My phone every 10 to 30 minutes would generate a new private key. And whenever I'm in close Bluetooth contact with Ben, then my phone sends him my key that it for that 10 to 30 minutes, and then your phone keeps track of that. So you have a database in your phone of the keys of all the people that you came in touch with, and likewise mine does the same thing. I get Ben's key for that moment, and then next time you run into me a day later, you may have a different key. So now I actually have two keys that are associated with you, but my phone doesn't really know that. It just keeps track of all of these keys.
Right.
And then what happens is down the line, it turns out, oh no, I've got the virus. I go in and tell it, hey, I've got the virus. And there's a central database that goes to. So all of my keys from my phone go to this database of people who have been infected. Your phone downloads that periodically and checks, that database against against their database. Says, oh no, we don't know who, we don't know when, but at some point you come in contact with someone who has been identified as carrying. So I like that aspect of it. That it's much more private. There's not like a central database of everyone's connections. I think I can't think of a better way of doing it that would keep privacy going.
I can't. And thank you for explaining that, because very interesting how they work, how it works. I think at the same time though, and I don't know if I've talked about it with you or with others here on the show. This idea of depersonalized data, where data can be stripped of your name, your address, your personally identifiable information.
Right.
At the same time, though, we have seen reports from, I want to say it was the New York Times or or the Washington Post. Someone did a long expose. Essentially, there's only so many people that take the same roads as you, that meet the same people as you, that go in the same places, geolocated at these places, even if it's fully depersonalized. If it's still this level of data, they can still identify Ben out of the entire group.
Sure.
You know, and really, I can't think of contact tracing where it tracks your location, who you're with, and things like that. I can't imagine there being any way. You know, even with these key system, which sounds great, I can't imagine there's any way to truly remove the person from the data. So, again, I appreciate that they tried, but it's just never going to be enough for someone weird like me. Well, you know, someone who's just concerned about
But
privacy.
in this case, at least they can only track you for 10 to 30 minutes, and then you have a new ID number.
True, but you know,
So that would make it awfully difficult to try and connect random ID numbers.
and
might be
and don't get me wrong, the odds that any government agency, any kind of shadow organization, any kind of hacker, any kind of whatever tracks a person using this, very, very unlikely. I think there was an article though yesterday that I didn't get to. They have like an entire database that, entire service that you can set up contact tracing with. And I don't think it was this one, because this one you actually put in like your phone number and things like that. And someone within a government organization used that information to contact someone who was there. So like I have seen instances of that, and I'll probably find that. Let's see, you have PDF. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, you're good. But yeah, I mean,
and page 4 of that is the kind of what we're talking about.
perfect. And I'm not saying that, you know, one instance completely negates what Google and Apple are trying to do here. And like I said, way at the beginning, I understand the altruistic benefits of this. This like in today's day and age, like I'm sure during the Black Plague, they would have loved something like this. During COVID, you know, in the early stages of COVID-19, this would have been amazing. And Mike, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but they think that one of the early spreaders of COVID-19, can you guess what was one of the first places that it really kind of got around?
No.
CES.
Oh, that doesn't shock me. I mean,
I
isn't that kind
know.
of any kind of conference, really? It's just
Yeah, and CES, because they had many Chinese nationals there and places like that.
It's very international, and not just Chinese, but they have people from all sorts of countries there. So yeah,
Well, yeah,
makes sense.
and of course, people coming from China is one thing, but then of course people going back to France,
exactly.
Italy, to South America. Yeah, it's and I actually got the sickest I've ever gotten from CES this year. So
I'm not sad that I missed it this year.
yeah, there you go. But and if I had received an alert, even by text saying, "Hey, you were at CES. There's a high chance that you could have gotten it from here. Quarantine yourself." I would have obeyed. I would have followed the guidelines. It's just so hard for me to see other things like other databases. The national, I keep on saying the National Health Services, the NSA, Patriot Act. There's the Department of Homeland Security. So many times we've seen databases. Oh yeah, like 17 states in their DMVs are taking facial recognition data from driver's license photos. We've seen so much data collection going on. The airports. Who runs the airports? Or the security force for
TSA.
TSA. Thank you. The TSA is collecting fingerprints and facial scans and things like that. I mean, it's one of those things that I feel tinfoil hat about, but I know enough about it that there are databases set up like this, and I appreciate Google Google and Apple working together to do keys and private keys and trying to do this kind of thing. And you're right, it will make it harder. It's just a step too far, I feel, because the technology is getting to the point where it can't get that dangerous, where they can track everyone, everything, everywhere you go, everything you do, if they don't do it already. But hey.
Yeah, there's certainly plenty of ways for them to do it already. I haven't figured out a way where this will make it any easier for anyone to do it, but if you have Facebook installed on your phone anyway, what do you have to worry about?
It's pretty much exactly.
Although now that we're all wearing masks, that might help with the facial recognition problem of walking around in public. That's got to slow down their recognition a little bit.
Let's just say at the DMV, they would not let me wear my mask while I took my photo. I thought it would have been a great period piece, but a sign of the times.
Go figure.
Yeah, and there's even another article that we're not going to get into, but it has to do with Mitch McConnell. Essentially, they proposed they said that the FBI can take internet data without a warrant. So no warrants needed. They can send a letter to whatever your internet service provider is and get all of your logs from your ISP.
Interesting. I had not heard that.
Yeah, without warrant. So, little things like that. It makes me, I don't know, contact tracing did not rub me the right way. And of course, what happens here in the United States is one thing. This is happening in China, like you said. The UK has their own.
And I will go on record as agreeing with you that the way that they do it right now, that everyone that I'm aware of does it, including the ones in China, is they have a central database where it records, Ben's phone came in touch with Mike's phone, and that is in a database somewhere. Those two identified people have been in touch, and
via
that's
Bluetooth,
obviously
yeah.
Right. Yeah. And they know of each other via Bluetooth, but the important part is not really that. That part of the technology is it's near field. It doesn't matter. But then that data is sent up to the government computer that keeps a log of Ben met Mike on this day at this location. And that's no good. That's obviously a major privacy issue that everyone should be alarmed about.
Yeah.
And that is not what this is. That's what I wanted to clear up.
Maybe something, and I know it's a buzzword, but maybe something with the blockchain, essentially a giant verifiable, not randomized, but anonymous set of keys like Apple and Google are kind of showing. Blockchain.
Yeah, and actually, I've heard other people refer to this almost as blockchain, just exactly as you just said. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, I'm hoping it doesn't become a national standard. Obviously, in times of crisis like these, it does not shock me when the government says, this standard that Apple and Google are working on, it needs a backdoor and it needs to be implemented on every phone made after 2020 or 2022.
The NSA would never do that to us. The government is here to help us.
Maybe. Okay, so there's that whole thing, COVID-19, and let's see, I have the topics here. So that is a whole half. What happened in the last 20 minutes? I blacked out. It was just words. Now, the next topic here. Yeah.
Well, I just was thinking, it's up to you. You can go whichever way you want, but I was thinking in terms of coronavirus that we can talk a little Tesla.
Yeah.
Elon Musk has.
Oh my God, Elon Musk. I need some kind of like weird 90s Batman like villain music now whenever we mention Elon Musk has been going.
It's hard to tell sometimes, right? If he's the villain or not. Like
well, let's go back a little bit in time. Did you catch the tweets? Because he makes ripples with his tweets. Going back to like, I'm selling all my possessions. Yes. And he's naming his kid like Zaxar or something like that.
Yeah, A15 Zaxar A15. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm, yeah.
He's been and we've seen Elon do something like this, and like I don't want to comment too much on his personal life, but I think he
I'm worried.
Been diagnosed with like bipolar disease, and he's taking medication, things like that. I don't know what's going on with him, but he has been making drastic moves, and one of those is to completely defy, of course, the California local officials, state officials? I'm not sure which one
County,
it is.
yeah.
County.
So what happened is he likes to point out accurately that they were the only automaker that was not back to work during this pandemic thing. That all of the other major Ford, everyone else was up and running except for them. And California finally gave approval for them to be able to open. But the county that they're located in, that whatever contains Fremont, California, there, and I knew it, but I don't now, did not approve it. They said they had to remain closed, and there was a big fight going back and forth on it. And Tesla published this really nice
Alameda, by the way.
Alameda.
Alameda.
Okay, there you go. I stand. That's not what I would have guessed, actually. But the county officials said, no, you can't open, and Tesla came up with this beautiful booklet that you can download and look at about all of their safety procedures that they're going to do. They had pictures of their lunchroom, or they had plexiglass between each seat where you can sit and have lunch, and the PPP requirements, and that they can take your temperature at any time, and all these different things that they're going that they're taking it seriously. And then at some point, Elon just said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and open. Which for some reason wasn't that popular. I don't know why. And that prompted a letter from the mayor of the city saying, we should be able to work with these big companies because they're, important to our economy here, and they're taking the proper precautions. And then Elon said, we're moving our headquarters to Texas now because of all of this trouble in California. We're going to move our headquarters to Texas, and whether or not we keep the Fremont factory going in the future is yet to be seen.
Yeah, essentially he threw up his hand and said, fine, I'll take my toys elsewhere. And
taking my marbles and going home.
Yeah, essentially stormed off the playground. And
then the county said, oh, wait, hang on a second. Actually, we've thought about it, and you can open.
Yeah. So tell me what the current state is, because last I heard, they were in violation. Like, they sent cops, I think, like a day or two ago to the facility. But of course, they had a letter from the governor saying that they could open. But then, they were sent by the county that they couldn't open.
Right.
But they're allowed to operate now, is I think where we're at.
Yeah, that's
now.
my understanding right now, that they have allowed them to open up now. There was a joke going around that when the police officers came up, that Elon had these 3D holograms standing there that they arrested in place of the actual.
There
employees.
You go. That's smart. And of course, I like this comment here in the article saying that Tesla did not immediately respond for comment from the BBC, but at the same time that the county issued its update, Musk tweeted, quote, "Life should be lived."
See, well, I'm a big fan of Elon, but I don't know, man. Like,
should life be lived to the freest when we're in the middle of a pandemic? I think that's the question we're all asking.
I like to run around the neighborhood just shooting guns up into the air because life should be lived.
Yeah, it's how I feel best. I am living my life. To sell all my possessions, name my kid something that looks like a Cracker Jack box decoder thing, and move thousands of jobs into a completely different state on a whim. So
I don't know, man. I'm worried about him. I legitimately am. I love, Tesla. I love all that they're doing.
I honestly,
he does amazing things, and he's got such a unique way of looking at things.
We have talked about Elon Musk in the past, and I'm right there with you. I think that he, so many people out there say that he's just a face. He's just like a decent businessman. No, he's actually really smart.
I'm not sure that he is a great businessman, but
well, he's at least the face of a business, but he's actually very technically inclined. Like
he definitely is. There's no doubt about it.
So to see him kind of go so off the rails like that, and of course, doing interviews with Joe Rogan and stuff like that, probably not the best idea.
Right?
Currently.
He should be on Computer America. He shouldn't be on Joe Rogan.
I don't think I could handle that.
I don't think I could.
So Tesla is now up and operating, I guess, and but I still think that their production's still going to be behind. But I guess just getting people back to work, it's good. It's just, is this the best way? Pretty crazy.
It is crazy. I mean, and he just, like I said, he just has a different way of thinking about things and looks at the world very differently than you and I, including thinking that we're living in a simulation.
Well,
Have you seen that?
I think I did, although I think that was proven that's not true, so I don't know where he's getting that from.
I'm still pretty convinced that we are in a simulation. That may be a topic for another day, but I'm pretty sure this is a simulation. First time I heard that, I was like, that's ridiculous. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. And then the more research I did on it, I was like, oh, son of a gun.
For anyone who wants to look into that, I highly recommend there was actually an experiment done to see if we lived in a simulation. And they use, I think, like not even like an electron microscope, but something like even finer. And they tried to essentially drill down as far as they can, maximum magnification, to see if they could see quote unquote pixels of the universe. Because obviously if you put your face right up against your monitor, you will see pixels. Yeah, there are none in the universe. So I don't think we're in a simulation, but
at least not one that uses pixels.
You never know. But so that is the topic for another time. I do want to say one more bit of Elon Musk, and this has to do with his offshoot company, not SpaceX, but rather, or Starlink is another one that he's working on, but the Boring Company, and boring as in, well, boring through Earth. This is actually a bit of good news about Elon. So this is cool.
Yeah, so they finished their second tunnel that they're drilling under Las Vegas, and fortunately, nothing's collapsed into it just yet. And I guess they finished it here just in time for CES next year, if they have a CES next year.
I don't think they will.
I think that the Las Vegas Convention Center is going to be hurting for big conventions for some time to come.
Yeah.
And the size of those conventions that take place are going to be much, much smaller than they typically are. Yeah. So anyhow, it's poor timing, unfortunately, but they've been working on creating these tunnels underneath Las Vegas to the convention center, just to make it easier to get pedestrians to and from the convention center area. And they've been making progress on that and finished their second tunnel that is going to be the first phase of the $52 million project. And it's going to shuttle people into these convention centers.
Well, yeah. And of course, looking at this, they're using a Tesla, of course, but I'm trying to think what kind of system this is going to be. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is going to be one of those things that, sorry about that.
No worries.
This is going to be one of those things that kind of clamps your car down, almost like a rail, and then it will take your car to a parking lot or a different destination.
Yeah. So there's two different things, actually. So the original idea for the Boring Company is something Elon came up with when he was stuck in traffic around LA. For some reason, there's traffic there. Go figure. And he said, it's silly that we build all of our roads in 2 dimensions, that we should have 3 dimensions. We should have roads, underground, and then you can have several layers of them going in different directions and be able to have a lot more volume moving over the same, plane.
Yeah.
And he said, you know what, I might actually start a company to do this. And then, he joked about calling it the Boring Company. And then next thing we know, crazy Elon starting up another company. The photo that you see there of the Model X there in the tunnel is actually in their test tunnel in Hawthorne, California. That's not at the Las Vegas Center. And so what they're drilling in Hawthorne has this skid that goes through the tunnel that carries a Tesla vehicle on it. And it's like what you were describing, that the Tesla vehicle can be driven up onto the skid. The skid goes very, very quickly, I forget the speeds, through this tunnel to the other side. And their idea is to be able to further increase that over time. And but in Las Vegas, what they're doing is more of a people mover system. So it's not clear yet exactly what that's going to look like, but it's not going to be full-size vehicles that you drive into it and move through.
Yeah, and looking here, Model 3s, Model X, and by the way, the fact that it only works with Teslas, I get that. That's the company that they're associated with, and they're going to make sure it works with their stuff first. I hope it's universal. But the other one is a tram built that can fit between 12 and 16 passengers. So there's probably going to be some kind of standing room only. Trams, if you were at CES, they have like these, essentially 16 people trams that they can do. And I was looking for speed. I didn't see that, but they said they can move about 4,000 people an hour, which is, people per hour. I feel like that's a good measurement. We should start using more and more in our day-to-day lives. Pretty good. And more to your point, Elon thinks of things in a different way. And, like you said, why do we think of roads as two-dimensional? Why don't we think of them as three, and why not under the ground? So I'm hopeful that this project, because this was like this is almost like a pioneer project. Like if this works here,
Right.
I think other states are going to look into it.
Well, there's other cities that have already asked to be put on the list for it. I think I can't remember if it was Chicago that was one, and there was another Midwest city.
LA for sure with the airport.
Yeah, that would make sense. I don't know if I heard about that one, but it would certainly make sense.
Yeah, LA wants one from the airport to downtown, and I want to say like not Boulder, Colorado, but Denver, Colorado, maybe somewhere around there.
There was another Midwest one I thought that wanted it, and it was for a stadium of some kind of sports ball stadium to downtown. They were going to have a loop for.
Well, still, and I think the really cool thing here for anyone out there who hasn't seen how they're actually doing this, it's just a giant like kind of drill that just kind of bores through the ground, and they can get this perfectly cylindrical, usable tunnel, not in a vacuum, but still a usable tunnel very, very quickly. And, like they said, they finished the first one in February and the second one's done just like 2 or 3 months later. These things are going to, start appearing pretty quickly. So,
yeah, I think you're right.
I like it. I honestly do. And hopefully Elon can keep his stuff together, because we need, innovative stuff like that to kind of keep society moving.
Well, and it's expensive and time consuming to drill these type of tunnels and to get permission to do it. But it makes a lot of sense on a grander scale that how can you continue to have these cities that are built higher and higher with taller buildings and higher density people, and we still have, the roads and in some places subways that are underground, but it's just kind of furthering that to be able to keep your personal transportation with you and pop out on the other side and be able to keep driving.
Well, yeah, and the way that they did tunnels before this, I'm not an expert on tunnels, but it involved crews, blasting crews, heavy equipment to kind of shuttle everything out. I think the cool thing about the Boring Company is that they essentially drill that circular tunnel, and then they have that metal enclosure that they kind of slip, like the shell that they slip in as they're working. So,
right.
Like the entire system is unique to what the Boring Company does. As I said before, let's hope Elon Musk can keep together. So, with that being said, keeping it together, that's a great transition to Google and Chrome. So, I have to ask you, right now I'm using Chrome here for the show. I have windows open with about 15 tabs, and yeah, we are going to do a count. Mike, what is a typical browsing session look like for you?
I don't think this one is atypical right now. Let me see. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Chrome windows open with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'd say about a dozen or so tabs altogether.
Altogether, not bad. I have seen some people who haven't closed their Chrome down in about 2 years. They have thousands of tabs, and I'm not kidding, thousands of tabs. Could you imagine the insanity a person must have?
How do you even find anything? You don't find anything. All you're doing is just creating a new one whenever you need to go to the same. You have the same website open 10 different times because you're too lazy to go back and find it.
Yeah, pretty much. Like there must be something in their head. There's like, I need that tab, but then they just keep burying it under more and more tabs.
I think we've all been guilty of that. Like, oh, I'm going to come back and finish this later.
Yeah, and then there's just a random window minimizing your tray forever. But it's one of those things that Chrome is notorious for having a memory leak, just taking a lot of resources, and the longer you leave it open without a restart, it will consume more and more of your memory, your RAM. And I'm the people who have thousands of tabs open, I can only imagine that like they walk into their home office or wherever the heck they keep their computer, and their computer is just screaming at the top of its lungs because it's being cannibalized from the inside by Chrome. So tabs have become a problem, and I don't think this one tackles the resource side issue of Chrome, because I don't think Google sees that as a problem, but this at least tackles the tab side, which, ever since tabs were first introduced to me, I think Opera, we actually had Opera on the show when they invented tabs. It it was cool. It was revolutionary how tabs,
Yeah.
change browsers.
Oh, yeah.
It's time for a little bit of an update. So what about this article?
Yeah. So what Google's coming out with, and it's now out in the beta version of Chrome. It hasn't hit the finished version yet, but it allows you to group your tabs and color code them and label them. So I can have a group of tabs called Work, and a group of tabs called Computer America, and a group of tabs called Tech Support Guy, and a group of tabs called whatever, and be able to move them and have them color coded and organized, and just try to keep track of, even though you're still going to have a ton of tabs there. And I suspect 99% of people will never go to the trouble of actually organizing them. But for people who are anal enough to actually want to do that, that capability will be in there now. And I think that if you watch the animation of it there, it's kind of a neat idea to try and take it to the next step and try to keep things organized.
The animation of it, unfortunately,
is it not showing up in yours?
Yeah, there's some ridiculous happening with the way my thing's set up, but
See if that link in the chat there pops up.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Yeah, actually that does work. That's perfect. So yeah, you can see there, you can of course label these different tabs, like you said, for work, and you can color code them. Oh, you know what this really reminds me of? What it really comes down to, like, this isn't as revolutionary as it first sounds. This is more Excel. this is like labeling Excel.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. And the idea here is to try to group, similar type of tabs together in whatever way you want to. And I suspect it's the first, step to something else, because you would imagine, and I haven't heard that this is the case, but you would imagine then that you would, in this case, on that example you had on the screen, you had Work and Best Friend as groups of tabs there. But then you could, minimize the work ones, or, and just hide away the titles of those 2 or 3 tabs inside that group, and be able to move groups of tabs from one window to another. And I can see it as useful for sure.
Yep. It's, and wow, I just read the first sentence of this article. 864,896 browser tabs open at a single time.
That's a very specific number.
Yeah, that's scary.
Someone's looking at your computer, Ben.
No, like I said, 15 tops, and then everything gets the boot. And by the way, if we're just talking about useful things, this is not directly from Chrome, although I do still prefer Chrome. Chrome is a wonderful browser.
Go on, go and finish your statement. I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah. The only extension that I would mention, because we're talking about tabs and that kind of thing, and it does have to do with the resource side, but it's if you want to keep all those tabs up, I think it's called the Great Suspender. I think.
Yeah, I've used that. Right. I've heard that that's good for battery life on notebooks as well.
Yeah. And all it really does is just kind of, if you haven't clicked on a tab within your Chrome browser, it will essentially put it to sleep. It will shut down all the plugins and stuff, stop consuming resources to kind of keep it up and running. And it will essentially suspend the website until you click on it again.
And they mention also here in the article that this feature has existed in other browsers like the Vivaldi and Opera, and also through browser extensions.
Right.
So I wanted to throw that out to Opera again.
Yeah.
So don't tell anyone, Ben. I'm going to tell you a secret. All right.
Sure.
Don't tell anyone. But recently, I've been using the Edge browser as my primary browser on my laptop. On my PC here, I still am using Chrome as the primary. But I've been using the new Microsoft Edge that's built on Chromium, in my defense.
Yeah. So
you're judging me. I can see judgment in your eyes.
Well, no. It's Chrome. The new Edge, I think, was the right call, because the old Edge that Windows 10 first was released with, they're like, it's a brand new. It's a brand new browser. Internet Explorer is dead. Now welcome to Edge, and it's going to be great. Right. If and Chrome and Chromium was an open source project from the beginning. We saw this with Microsoft also adopting the Linux shell, to kind of do behind the scenes things.
Server.
Yeah, like they have been embracing open source in a very healthy way, and I think the new Edge browser is definitely a good example of that. So I don't blame you. It looks good.
And I think I've been getting better battery life out of my laptop with it than I have on Chrome. I haven't done any actual tests to verify that. In my mind, at least that's the case.
Well, like I said,
Um,
Chrome is a resource hog. So
Yeah, it kind of is, and I've really not run into any trouble using it. So anyhow, and like you said, for those who don't know it, I think it's very confusing the naming of it. There was a Internet Explorer, then there was Edge from Microsoft, and then there's the new Microsoft Edge, which you would think they would have named differently or had a version number in the title of it or something to
Edge
differentiate it,
Chromium
because
or
it's a
something. Yeah.
huge difference between the old Edge and the new Edge. I mean, it's a completely different framework that it's built on. But
Yeah.
anyhow.
I fully embrace what it is that Edge has become. I gotta say though that really plugins are my big thing.
Well, and so that's the other nice thing with it, is that all of the extensions that I can use in Chrome, I can actually also install in Edge.
Yep.
Microsoft gives you a little warning, at least the first time, saying, "Hey, if you install these from the Google extension store or whatever that's called, then Microsoft has not validated these." But I just said okay, and it installs them anyway. So that's kind of nice too, for the same reason. It's opens up your options, because I think that kind of goes back to Microsoft realizing that you can have a really great Microsoft Windows phone, but if there's no programs you can run on it,
Yeah.
if no one's writing software for it, it really doesn't matter.
And really, you thought that they would have learned that with 8 in Windows 8 and 8.1 and Windows Phone, but turns out they didn't. And really, that was the end of Edge for so many reasons. But just no. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. They said that they were going to bring plugin add-on integration into Edge,
Right.
and then they delayed it for like 2 years.
Right.
They said it's coming, and then it just didn't show up. So now
Right.
now that the Chromium version exists, Edge is okay in my book. The reason I switched from Mozilla Firefox back in the day to Chrome was that Mozilla Firefox had an unpatched security flaw like 8 years ago that they didn't get to for like 3 or 4 months. And I just kept hearing about it. And I was like, I'm going to switch over until they get it fixed. I never went away. To me, I don't switch browsers until there's a problem that needs solved. So
Sure. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
And you get so adjusted to the shortcuts and everything in the browser that you use. It's sometimes
yeah,
hard
like
to switch.
Control T is like a new tab. That's amazing. So
I think that one might be a little bit more universal, but
it probably is. So there you go. There's that one. And really, did they say when? Because this is obviously going to be in beta. Are they going to
yeah,
push
it's
this
still in
out?
beta. I haven't heard that there's a date for it to be pushed out yet. I would expect it's probably still a couple of months out, but
Yeah,
that's
once
just
they're
my
available.
gut.
Yeah. So once they're available, you can do that. And
And if you want to try the beta version, you can do that too.
yeah, that's somewhere in the settings right there. You can sign up for like the early release program. Hey, if you're a risk taker, if you are one of the insane. So with that being said, speaking of updates, Microsoft and Windows 10, 32-bit and 64-bit operating systems has always been one of those things where like I always assumed I had a 64-bit, but everything would get installed and it would say it was a 32-bit version of the software. And, I would go out of my way to try to make sure it was 64-bit, but things would still get installed as 32-bit. The biggest headache when it came to installing programs and things like that, this article you found is a little ray of sunshine in those dark times.
Yeah, so it turns out Microsoft has recently announced that beginning in the May 2020 update, they're no longer going to sell new versions of Windows 10 with 32-bit available. So right now, if you're manufacturing, you're building a new computer, we can go out and we can buy the OEM version of Windows 10 either as 32-bit or as 64-bit. Now they're cutting it off. They're like, okay, enough is enough. They've been much kinder than Apple would have.
Yeah.
Like, it's all right, guys. We've had 64-bit for how long now? 15 years? I don't know. It's time to move on. And I can't imagine. I wonder how many people were still buying 32-bit Windows anyway, at least knowingly.
Yeah, I think that was a big problem, was that how many people are purposely doing it. Because I'm trying to think of certain industries that would need a 32-bit operating system. And I would imagine that over the last 10 years, most have switched over to the 64-bit architecture, at least, when designing software. So.
Right. Yeah, I think that is the case for sure. And as you mentioned before, even if you have a 64-bit version of Windows, you can still run 32-bit programs in it.
Yeah.
You may do so unintentionally, and it's practically invisible to you that you're doing so. So it's yeah.
I find it pretty funny that one of the best data aggregate for people's systems continues to be Steam's essentially Steam's launcher
survey. Right.
Yeah, where Steam can kind of show you how many people are playing what game, how often, how many hours are they playing, and of course what hardware people are running. And they actually, here in the article, kind of quote here that in April 2020 only about 0.2% of people use Windows 32-bit, whereas 86% of people use Windows 64-bit. Now, obviously, that's for people who play a lot of video games because it's Steam.
Right. And
but
those people are more likely to have more modern machines and know the difference.
Yeah.
And it's worth mentioning, as far as the difference goes, that one of the biggest reasons that people moved from 32-bit to 64-bit is because with 32-bit, you were really limited on how much RAM you could have. I think it was 4 gigabytes of RAM in 32-bit, if I'm not mistaken.
Let's see, 32
64-bit, it's crazy amount.
Max RAM.
If only we had all of man's knowledge at our fingertips.
Yeah, if only. 32-bit machine maximum amount of memory usable is around 4 gigabytes. Depending on the OS.
What is it for 64?
Well, and I have it here, but let's see. So depending on the operating system, a little bit less, because obviously the operating system is going to reserve some of it to do its thing. So it's less than 4 gigs. Whereas on a Windows machine, on a 64-bit, you can have 2 to the 64 bytes of memory. So obviously you're going from 2 to 32 to 64. It's not even like multiplied by 2. It's like to the power of, whatever. So a lot more.
It looks here that 32-bit supports 4 gigabytes. And like you said, you can't use all of it. And 64-bit supports 16 exabytes.
Yeah, and we're not there yet.
How many exabytes of data do you have in your computer? It's funny when you replay this video in 10 years, that might actually mean a thing.
Well, yeah, really 20 years ago, I think we were still talking in megabytes, and now we're safely in the terabyte age. I think that Apple, since you mentioned them, Apple is actually selling an iMac. I think it's like an iMac Pro with, or at least a Mac Pro with, I think, about 4 terabytes of RAM. Like not just storage, but RAM.
Yeah, right.
It's incredible, but that's crazy nowadays. 4 terabytes of RAM in another 5, 6, 7, 8 years is probably going to be, somewhere standard. So,
and that's the question though, is it though? Because are we moving in that direction, or are we moving the other direction? Are we going to have just dummy terminals that go to the cloud? Like, you have all these online gaming platforms now that are coming out from Google and whoever else, where you just have a dummy machine, basically. It doesn't need to have all that hardware and video processing, and everything's done up in the cloud.
Over the past 10 years, the trend, and I'm actually happy to, kind of end the conversation here with, kind of meandering a little bit. But sure. I got to say that over the past 10 years, Mike, pay me $1 right now. Just pay me $1 for every time you heard the phrase, the death of the PC, the death of the home computer, the death of the desktop. And think about tablets.
It'd be a couple bucks.
Yeah, think about tablets, phones, laptops, netbooks, ultrabooks. They have called the death of the home PC so many times, and yet it's reversing. Sales are going up now that especially people are having to work from home. They want a home desktop computer more and more.
Right. For productivity, it's hard to beat.
Yeah, so I think that home desktops are here to stay, and I know what you're saying. Local computing versus something that would be on the cloud. Obviously, with networks getting better and better, being able to handle data faster and more instantaneously, do you really need something local to handle what can be done in the cloud? I think that we still will, and here's my meander is that I have been watching people online, like, Twitch streams and things like that. And I was watching someone trying to, there was an article out today talking about polygon count and, this new thing from the Unreal Engine that can, make 1 trillion polygons in like a single kind of tech demo that they were doing. And at the same time, he was trying to compare and contrast it to ray tracing. And I don't know if you have heard of ray tracing, Mike.
I have heard of it.
Yeah. So ray tracing, for everyone out there does know, it's essentially how light acts within a video game. And real-time ray tracing that like NVIDIA has been pushing is about how light bounces off, it comes from a source, bounces off material. It's going to bounce different off of
Create shadows.
Yeah, create shadows. It's going to bounce differently off of stone versus metal. Sunlight just kind of does that. And he was trying to do this, and I realized that Computer America's job is not done because education about these topics, I think people are hearing the words, but when it comes to like ray tracing and RAM and memory and all this kind of stuff, the average consumer is still so in the dark about what's actually happening. And it's always
changing.
Yeah, that too. It's and even something as simple as 32-bit to 64-bit. Right. I bet you the majority of people out there, the only reason 64-bit is more popular is not because of the limitations like you said, but because 64 is a larger number than 32.
And that's what came with their computer. Like I don't know. That's what
when given the choice, they're going to choose 64 over 32 because it's a higher number. And of course, because that's what they should do. So I feel like our job is not done here on Computer America. And of course, your job with techguy.org is not done because, these questions, what's that saying that you have? It's like, there's no stupid questions. They're just the easiest to answer. And
that's exactly right. There's no such thing as a stupid question, but they're the easiest to answer. Yep.
Right. Yeah. And people are going to keep asking these questions. It's, I've more than ever lately, I have felt that the general amount of technology exposure that people have has never been greater, but the comprehension of technology terms, phrases, of concepts has never been lower. I really do feel that. And I don't have a Steam survey to kind of back that up, but that's just how I feel. And Mike, in your field, you work with businesses on a day-to-day doing this kind of thing. Don't you feel like, maybe concepts are being missed, but phrases are, more known?
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think we're going to be out of a job anytime soon. There's, it's been a change. And I've been I've been told that, the younger demographic, as they come up to an age and they open up their own businesses and they become the people who run the business, they're not going to need IT support so much because they already know how to, set up a wireless router and whatnot. But it's like, yeah, but do they though? And
yeah, but really,
and also, there's so much more complication to that. And things are always changing. It's like, yeah, but what about VPNs and what about? There's a lot of. So yeah, I don't think everything's in a constant state of change. So there's always something new to learn.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out more about that, techguy.org, computeramerica.com, tech support at the top and in the show notes. Mike, thank you so much. We're out of time. Everyone, have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.